There are toys, and then there are freak-out-worthy toys. Toys that get big reactions like...
OMG, no way!
Or...
Best present ever!
Or...
It's what I've always wanted.
For those toys, you need Walmart. They've got exclusives from major brands like Disney, Barbie, and Adventure Force that you can't find anywhere else. Toys that make kids jump for joy.
Thank you!
And make you a hero for giving them. Shop hundreds of exclusive toys.
Yes!
Welcome to your Walmart.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want your connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. How are you, Kieran? I want people to know how you are because you had a big old accountants reunion yesterday, didn't you? You were very excited.
I did, yes. The people I started with in 1983.
Wow.
Met up with some of them, and it was a different world then, Kevin, because today you have all the psychometric testing and everything that goes with it. And this is the honest interview that I went through. I walked into this office trembling. This chartered accountant peered over his glasses at me, and I thought, I've done some preparation. I've learned some things parrot fashion. And he said to me, I see in your CV, you've played cricket for Sussex under-19s.
Oh.
And I go, oh, yes, sir. He says, what do you do? I said, I'm an opening bowler, left arm, drift it in, nip it away off the seam. How fast are you? So I'm pretty swift, sir, pretty swift. Great, you're in. I want to win our national cricket competition before I retire. So he recruited 6 cricketers. And a couple of people that could do the scoring. So we met up. It was the cricket team sort of meeting up. We were crap accountants, but we were a damn good cricket team.
Oh, I bet you were good scorers, though.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Everything always balanced, but batting and bowling added up perfectly, and very, very neat ticking.
I can just imagine the umpires. Well, how's that? Well, it depends.
Yes.
In a previous life, when I was a fairly senior officer in recruitment at the London Ambulance Service, if an application form, even the mere idea of an application form seems a bit quaint and old-fashioned, but underneath, interests, if it said reading or walking, you would just cross it out and put no interests.
Yes.
Because that always was the last resort. And I don't know, what's my interest? Put down walking. Okay. Every now and again, if I was in a bad mood at an interview, I'd say, what sort of walking are you interested in then? It's not really a transferable skill when it comes to ambulance. But there you go. It's Newsday, Kieran, and we have a they're all big news stories today, Kieran, especially if you're a Reading fan, but we've got a big news story to start with. And it seems like, Kieran, on the face of it, that Everton have new owners.
Certainly a lot of progress has been made between Farhad Moshiri, who's the current owner of 94% of Everton, and that's enough to allow you to control the club, and the Friedkin Group, who were that interested in Everton Football Club that they lent £200 million. And that's on a first date, that's a bit of a sign of commitment. And then, for whatever reason, and what we have seen in the media is that Friedkin were concerned with 777, who had also lent a lot of money to Everton Football Club, but Friedkin were concerned there could be a Proceeds of Crime Act issue arising, and that comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of distraction, and they decided publicly to walk away. We then saw John Textor effectively take up prime position, and my spidey senses weren't working. And I'm not claiming this as a good call, but I did actually go on Sky in July and said, I don't think you can rule Friedkin out.
Yeah. Sorry.
And that was purely on the back of having run some companies in administration. If somebody puts in some funding and they don't take it out, immediately they walk away from a negotiation, they're still in the deal. If I got £200 million still riding on this, I'm still around. So John Textor, I had reservations about, not least because I wasn't convinced he'd be able to sell his Palace shares as easily as he was claiming he could sell his Palace shares. You know the Palace inside track far better than I do. And you're fully aware that the other parties, the other owners, have a degree of influence over how he would be able to sell those shares. So it wasn't going to be an easy sell. And when we've discussed earlier this summer Everton Football Club, I think there was a concern that the wage bill probably somewhere in the region of £13 million a month. They're probably bringing in less than £1 million a month in terms of gate receipts. And the egg timer was ticking in the background. If you've got 13 million going out and 1 million coming in each month, yes, you've got a bit of savings from the TV deal, from a couple of player deals and so on. But the money was going to run out, which meant that there was pressure on Farhad Moshiri to come up with a solution. And of the options, 777 would have been an absolute nightmare. There's things that we can say about 777. We often make reference to this thing called a Brownberg when it comes to owners. We're now in a position to pick up information from journalists and other interested parties who can say, well, you can't say this, but blah, 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 blah. And so, WhatsApp information about 777 was not positive at all. So they're out of the way. Textor's out the way he was mouthing off, and also the fact that he's had some shares suspended for saying things which he shouldn't have done. So he was a loose cannon. I don't think that Evertonians need a loose cannon in charge of them. So Friedkin already owns a football club of high stature in AS Roma. Everton are a high stature Premier League club. So he knows what works and what doesn't work. He knows what happens if he makes the fans unhappy. And the fact that he was still willing to come back, I think, is a positive. So it's 3 cheers from me in terms of Friedkin. And normally I'd only give 2, and in many deals that we discussed in the past. But I think he is by far the best choice. He certainly has the resources to complete the stadium. He has the resources to pay the bills in terms of working capital. And if Everton do have any leeway in terms of PSR, and they've not got very much, I'll be perfectly honest, he has the wherewithal to be able to provide those funds when it comes to January as well.
It's really annoying, Kieran. Teams always seem to get good news just before they play Palace. It's like Leicester had their fear of points deduction thrown out the week they played us. Everton have got good news, and so everyone's going to be buoyant when we turn up there on Saturday. So I'm not looking for bad news, Kieran. Obviously, there are a couple of things. First of all, Moshiri owns 94%, I think, is the figure everyone's been talking about. So I'm intrigued to know about the other 6%. Secondly, the Roma thing, Friedkin are buying Everton. Everton are a club, traditionally, when we were growing up, who were in and around the top 6 of the Premier League, the First Division. They were a club that frequently played in Europe. The Friedkin Group will be looking to return them to those days. So the fact that they own AS Roma surely is a bit of an issue, is it not? Because every likelihood they could end up in the same competition within 2 or 3 seasons.
Yes, I think you've raised 2 very valid points there. As far as the remaining 5.9% of shares in Everton, these are in the main owned by fans.
Okay.
So Moshiri bought his shares off the big players as far as Everton were concerned. You've got individual fans who love the club. Would they be willing to sell out? That's down to an individual choice. I still think that quite a few of these people, they like the fact that it allows them to attend the annual general meeting. Many of them are quite wealthy independently, and therefore they don't physically need the cash. So I can't. You could have an offer made for everything. There's no doubt that, but I'm not sure that would necessarily be accepted. In terms of the position of AS Roma, I think you're right. It's an intriguing position. I went to Roma last year. They were in the Europa League. It was an amazing experience as an away fan. The amount of noise that was made, I think it puts many of our Premier League grounds to shame. It was absolutely incredible. And Rome's a big city in a big country, in a big football country. So those are all positives. AS Roma have not had a distinguished start to the season, and the fans have already started to get onto the Friedkin Group's back. That's the level of expectation you'll get. But I think you're absolutely right. I could see a position in a few years' time when both clubs are playing in Europe and both clubs end up in the same competition, then we've got a complication. We've seen that sort of being dealt with this season when UEFA have made Offshore Jim sell his blind trust or set up a blind trust and similar in respect of Manchester City. But it's an imperfect solution. A lot will depend on the attitude of UEFA. Does it want to sort of hold its nose a little bit and say, we believe that this is going to work? I think a further complication, at the end of the day, somebody's got to be top dog in the group. And both Roma and Everton fans would not take kindly if they perceived their club to be the second club in this particular MCO, the multi-club ownership model. So, yeah, I think that's an issue. In many ways, it's a nice problem to have in 2 or 3 years' time.
And in terms of the owners and directors test, which took forever and eventually never happened with 777, no, it doesn't seem that there's any likely to be any delay. And I imagine the Premier League would probably be hoping to get that done as quickly as possible. What would the sort of earliest timescale be for that to be done, do you think?
Well, assuming that Moshiri and Friedkin have been working behind the scenes over the course of the last couple of months. So they've been working in parallel. We've also got to accept that Textor will have had some involvement. I don't see anything which should prevent the deal being signed off this side of Christmas.
Okay.
One would assume that given the nature of the announcement between Friedkin and Moshiri in his Blue Heavens Holdings company, that process may have already started. And in respect of the owners and directors test, what are we looking at? Do you have any outstanding convictions? No, that one's quite easily satisfied. Do you have the resources, A, to buy the club and B, to fund the club? Looking at the asset portfolio of the Friedkin Group, they're worth $6-7 billion. So that should not be a deterrent. We give the Premier League some criticism at times when I think it's warranted. I also think the Premier League does deserve a bit of a pat on the back because they did put up a series of hurdles in respect of 777, which made it increasingly difficult for 777 to get that particular deal over the line. And there's no doubt, in my opinion, from what we know about 777 and all of the complications, was that was not an ownership that you would have wanted at your club, even if it wasn't in a broader crisis in terms of not having had a good few seasons, PSR issues and so on.
There's been a fair few figures banded around, Kieran, in the papers, in the tabloids. Can you put an exact figure on how much the Friedkin Group are paying for Everton?
We don't know that at present. If we take a look at the borrowings of Everton Football Club, there's 200 million to rights and media funding. There's 200 million to 777. Whether they get all of that back, given outstanding complications that they have, I'm not so sure. And there's 200 million to the Friedkin Group. So clearly that loan will either be converted into shares or it will be kicked down the road. So you've got to have probably 450 million would be my guess. And that would also allow Farhad Moshiri to walk away with something. And his concern was he didn't want to walk away with nothing. He's put in 750 million and he'll probably walk away with 20 million, 25 million of that. Now, whether he's himself has been funded by third parties, benefactors, that's a private issue between him and his working colleagues, if there are any. We don't know whether there are. So it could be that money's going to end up going to somebody else.
Let's close this story, Kieran, by tying two loose ends together. You mentioned John Textor. You mentioned multi-club ownership. Depending, I think, on how posh you are, John Textor has either been slightly indiscreet in recent weeks or he's been shooting his mouth off. He's been saying a lot of things, speculating as to what he would do when he took Everton over, for example. And this weekend, it's quite clear that he's still trying to raise money. He still seems to be selling shares and raising money. Do we know what for? And secondly, he's raised a lot of hackles at Palace because he talked about Palace being part of his multi-club ownership group. And I don't think there are many people at Palace, including the other owners, who would actually take kindly to hear John Textor referring to us as that.
Yes, I would imagine a lot of parties at Crystal Palace would be very disappointed with the comments from John Textor. It's the equivalent of a bloke running off with somebody and then 2 weeks later coming back and expecting his wife to, or partner, whoever it's going to be, to say, "Oh, I'm great. So glad that you actually decided that I am your silver medal.
Yeah.
And I look forward to a happy future together in that particular relationship." So he's, in my view, has been very foolish with the comments that he's made. He is looking to set up a company that's going to be listed in New York, and that was not going to include Everton. Everton was going to be this separate deal, just of his, because it was deemed to be too risky. Whether Palace is going to be part of that, we'll have to wait and see. If I was a potential investor, would I be wanting to give £500 million or $500 million for effectively an indirect slice in Palace and an indirect slice in some of these other clubs? I think I'd need an awful lot of persuading.
Yeah, it's a shame. We've talked about him a lot, and I want to end it here, but he came into Palace as a kind of knight in shining armour, and now he's a complete loose cannon. It's an interesting case study for years to come. As you say, Kieran, this is really good news for Everton, but unfortunately, yin yang, etc., Reading fans have had some very bad news this week.
Yes, the prospective sale of the club to Rob Cohig, who had gone as far as, again, perhaps a little bit indiscreet. Let's get things over the line. So sometimes it's best to just announce the deal, and somebody goes, "Oh, that's fantastic." The deal from the Friedkin Group was not anticipated in terms of it was an announcement by the club, which took everybody by surprise. Rob Cohig was quite visible at Reading, was seen around town, was seen at the ground, was seen wearing a shirt and so on and a scarf, and that built up the hopes. Then when nothing suddenly happened, and nothing suddenly happened for a week and then 2 weeks and then 3 weeks, you did begin to wonder. So the deal is off. It could be due to the price. It could be due to what Dai Yonga, the current owner, was willing to sell in terms of the assets. It could that he was looking for add-ons, which Rob Cohig wasn't willing to pay. And Rob Cohig will be a really tough negotiator, by the way. Rob Cohig lent Reading Football Club somewhere in the region of £4 to £5 million, is our understanding. The announcement from the football club was that money has been repaid. And then you're thinking, well, okay, what have Reading got left to pay the bills? Now, thanks to Crystal Palace selling Michael Elise, they've got a few million on the back of that. But even so, they've got a club which has reasonably high outgoings. And then there was further bad news in the sense that the person who we believe that Dai Yonga had tasked with selling Reading Football Club is the former CEO, Nigel Howe. Now, the reason why he is the former CEO was that he was subject on an individual basis, along with the club, to a charge a few months ago. That resulted in a 12-month ban, and it was a strange 12-month ban in the sense that the first 6 months he was not allowed to have any dealings with player negotiations, and then the second 6 months he wasn't allowed to have any dealings at all in respect of football matters. And this would not just apply to Reading, this would apply to all football. So he ceased to be the chief executive, and he became, and I quote, the property projects manager, which means that a status below that of a board member, but he could present a property projects presentation to the board if the board ever had meetings. And he's done a good job for John Majewski, historically, who was the former owner. He appealed that ban, and the ban, which was due to come into force, I think it's the first week of October, is now that he has a 3-month ban on all football matters. So this means he cannot be involved in the negotiations to sell Reading Football Club for October, November and December. And I think it's the first week of January as well. Reading needs to be sold, and Reading needs to be sold reasonably quickly. So this was in respect of a complicated issue relating to an agent and a player, and an agent getting a slice of future action, which is against FA rules. As a chief executive, you know what the rules are. So clearly it wasn't the greatest decision he ever made. So that is where we are. Now, are there interested parties in Reading Football Club? Yes, there are. There is no doubt about that. So that's the positive. We've got the fact that it's close to London. I know we've said this before. It's close to Heathrow. So from an international, overseas ownership group perspective, that's a huge tick. What are you doing? You're acquiring a club which has played in the Premier League. You're acquiring a club which does have a relatively new stadium, and it's an out-of-town stadium. Good access in terms of transport and so on. So there's lots of things which would attract a prospective owner. Why has it taken so long, and why has so little progress been made in terms of the sale? Again, we don't know what's happened. All I can do is, based on my own experience of what I used to do, comes down to price. And sometimes you'll be sitting across a table, and I'm working on behalf of the administrators, and you think you've got a deal, and you go away, you finish work that day, and there's something just saying this ain't going to happen, and that they come back the following meeting, and either they were a time waster, or all of a sudden they want to go and change the terms of the deal and they're not acceptable. I suspect this has been the case on the sell side in terms of Dai Yonga. It's not been a successful ownership. He has lost an awful lot of money in terms of Reading Football Club. And is he trying to get to save some face? And is he trying to get a higher price? We'll have to wait and see.
I wish you hadn't used the expression "seen around town." So I've just had various Paul Weller songs going around in my head since then. You've touched on a frustrating thing, Kieran, for Reading fans, in that it's bad enough that the deal has collapsed. It's even worse that they don't know why. Because if they were told, if Kuhig said, look, in the end he was asking too much, you'd go, okay, fair enough, we understand that. But now they've got that worry, is that has it collapsed because of something that will put other people off buying us? Is Dai Yonga simply not going to sell? So that it's that dreadful uncertainty that Reading fans. So Reading fans have gone from a situation where they were half popping the corks on the champagne to just not knowing, and it's not right to put fans through that, Kieran. They've been through enough in the past 3 years without throwing them back into this turmoil again.
That's right, and people might be listening and saying, "Hold on, loads of businesses go bust, loads of businesses have change of hands." Yeah, but as we've always said, and we are quoting others, football's the most important thing, other than the important things in life.
Yeah.
And if you're a Reading, if you're a Bury fan, you're a Macclesfield fan, you've been through it at Palace in terms of administration. We've been through it at Brighton in terms of losing a stadium and so on. It's no fun. And whilst that shared misery does create some amazing bonds between fans, you'd rather not have it. And if somebody could offer Reading mid-table mediocrity and a new owner, they would snap their hand off.
Yeah, just for a couple of seasons at least.
There are toys, and then there are freak-out-worthy toys. Toys that get big reactions like,
OMG, no way!
Or,
Best present ever!
Or,
It's what I've always wanted.
For those toys, you need Walmart. They've got exclusives from major brands like Disney, Barbie, and Adventure Force that you can't find anywhere else. Toys that make kids jump for joy.
Thank you!
And make you a hero for giving them. Shop hundreds of exclusive toys.
Yes!
Welcome to your Walmart.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want your connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
We've learned, Kieran, in the years we've been doing this podcast, that football throws up some strange bedfellows. Some strange bedfellows, Kieran. That if I was Tranmere Rovers, I'd be putting on 2 pairs of pyjamas and spraying myself all over. Because this is an odd one, Kieran, isn't it?
Yes, this was a story which has been brokered by a friend of the show, the wonderful Matt Slater. And Donald Trump's former attorney, Joe Tacopina, is involved with a consortium of co-investors who are potentially going to buy Tranmere Rovers. By all accounts, there have been discussions for 6 months. This is partly on the back of the success which has been seen with Welcome to Wrexham and all of the glamour that has brought. Joe Tacopina is sort of front of house with regards to this. He will be effectively acting on behalf of a consortium. And I've just got the word here, amazing celebrities. Okay. And I've also highlighted the word more mysterious than the mysterious girl in Peter Andre's song, Mysterious Girl. We are talking some majorly mysterious A-listers here who have seen what's happened with Reynolds and McElhenney. They've seen what's happened with Birmingham and the huge excitement that's brought as a result of Tom Brady. And therefore, I think there's some backing here. As for Tacopina, an interesting defence attorney style. I think it's robust would be the way. He's represented, as well as Donald Trump. I think he was Donald Trump's representative in the Stormy Daniels shenanigans in relation to what happened or didn't happen. He has represented Rihanna's husband from some charges. And what I found most intriguing, that he is, and I quote, because he's New York, and we've watched The Sopranos, we've watched The Godfather. You would expect such a person to be in demand. He is, by all accounts, and I quote again here, shunned by the mob. So families, organisations, they don't want him to represent him because he's too cosy with law enforcement.
Wow.
Is what I've been told, and that could be nonsense. Now, does he have any experience of football? Yes, he does. We were talking about Roma earlier. He was formerly involved with Roma. He then went to Bologna in Italy. He then went to Venezia, and Venezia went from Serie C, and then they had 2 promotions under it. That he's worshipped in Venezia, and he's currently involved with Spal, Spal, who is not as popular there. They were relegated last season, and they started this season on -3 points because of the late tax payments, which Mr. Tacopina disputes. He was saying it was a bank error. He's had a 3-month suspension from Italian football on the back of that, which he's saying, hold on, Gov, nothing to do with me. So I think he will, if he comes into English football, he will make John Textor look like Mary Poppins.
What you're saying here, Kieran, is he's no Nick DeMarco. That's what you're saying. He's not
a man of decorum.
I think in the scheme of things, the amount of levels your relationship with the mob could be at, I think I'd settle for shunned by the mob. I'd want completely ignored by the mob would be highest on my list, but shunned, I'd go for shunned by the mob. Are Tranmere specifically up for sale, Kieran, or are they up for sale in the way that every club is up for sale if somebody with the right amount of money comes in?
Mark Palios, who is the current owner, Mark has come in, steadied the ship. I've met Mark on occasions. He He is also from an insolvency background. So the approach that he's taken has been very methodical. I think he feels that his job is done. So yes, he is looking for an exit route in terms of the club. They are looking potentially for somewhere new to play, and he certainly, he feels he doesn't have that level of resource to fund a new ground. So yes, the club has been up for sale on and off. Again, reading Matt's report, and Matt deserves huge credit for this, because I don't think Mr. Tapakino was overpleased to see that in the pages of Athletic. There are other parties interested. I know Mark Palios will have done his due diligence, and he does not want a negative legacy in terms of his ownership. He doesn't want to hand it across to a ne'er-do-well. So, even if it involves taking a lower offer.
The Athletic are owned by the New York Times, Kieran, so of course they would take an interest in this sort of thing. Leeds United are planning to spend a bit of money, Kieran, but on the ground rather than the squad.
Yes. If you take a look at what we have seen in recent years, Manchester United's capacity's gone up from 50-odd thousand to 74, 75. We've seen increases in the sizes of Arsenal and Spurs and West Ham in London. Palace are planning to do the same. Brighton have moved. City, Liverpool have extended their stadiums. So to a certain extent, if you want to be at the top table, you've got to have at least a 50,000 stadium. And this appears to be the decision which has been made by 49ers Investment and Red Bull, that Elland Road, which is a fierce and ferocious stadium, and it creates an absolutely cracking atmosphere. And that's credit there for Leeds United fans for doing that. The trouble is, you need more prawn sandwiches to be sold, because it's all very well having the fans who make the noise pay, but they've got limited budgets. So it looks as if there is a plan to expand Elland Road to 50,000. Leeds United will sell that out. They've got a big waiting list in terms of tickets. There is a positive feeling on the back of their promotion a few seasons ago now. So that will involve some short-term pain, I suspect, if they're going to have to make certain sections of the ground unavailable on a match-by-match basis for a year or two. But if you are looking to have match day revenue at the top tier, Manchester United 130-odd million pounds, I'd expect Spurs to be 120, Arsenal close to that as well. Liverpool, I think, could potentially hit 100 million. Leeds are far, far behind that. And if they return to the Premier League, which of course they are the favourite to do so, I think, this season, nobody's denying that, and then they want to establish themselves as a top 10, then a top 8, then a top 6 club, which is, for a city the size of Leeds, it is within their remit.
We've mentioned already, Kieran, Leicester City avoiding any deduction of points in the Premier League, thanks to the good offices of the aforementioned Nick DeMarco as well. But they now have another incentive to stay in the Premier League, do they not?
Yes, they do. I mean, this was a story which was released in one of the newspapers. I think this was Matt Hughes. It was his story, that the EFL was saying, well, if you weren't a member of the Premier League on the 30th of June 2023, you therefore potentially are a member of the EFL on the 30th of June 2023. And according to what we've seen, Leicester were £22 million over the limit, which would have been a 7-point penalty as far as the Premier League was concerned. But under the EFL's tariff, should they be relegated, they would have started next season on minus 12 points. Now, the shares were transferred on the 30th of June 2023. My understanding is that I don't think there's a lot of legs in this story. I'm picking up, I sort of sense that the EFL will have already done their due diligence. And if there was an opportunity to charge Leicester City Football Club, they would have done it last season and they would have held a separate commission. So whilst it's an intriguing position, my gut reaction is that I don't expect this to move forwards. First of all, the EFL cannot do anything whilst Leicester City are in the Premier League, and Leicester City could be in the Premier League. Palace have been there for for a decade or more. Brighton have been there for 7 or 8 years. There's no, why can't Leicester City do that? And then it would seem very strange that if Leicester don't return to the Championship until 2032, all of a sudden the EFL pop up like a meerkat and go, oh, by the way, 2023, we're now going to try to do you for a points deduction. So it's an interesting story, but my sense is that it's a story which isn't going to hold.
My gut reaction, Kieran, is that if Palace and Leicester were both relegated this season, Leicester would get the good news about not being deducted 12 points the day before they played us. My gut reaction. The issue, Kieran, of player welfare has really come to a fore this weekend. We've had talks of strikes. We've had most pundits and football people saying that Rodri's injury against Arsenal on Sunday was down to too much football. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And most of the people in football are saying that the FIFA World Club Cup is only going to make things worse in terms of player welfare, which might explain the behaviour of Gianni Infantino this week.
Yes, he's no stranger to chastising other people and other stakeholders in the game. And this would appear to be the case in relation to the FIFA Club World Cup. I can't think of anybody who's planning to go to it, who has said that they're looking forward to it. It's a tournament which is due to take place in 2025. There are some big clubs that are going to be there. Real Madrid's going to be there. Chelsea are going to be there for winning the Champions League. Manchester City are going to be there. Liverpool aren't. Manchester United aren't. Arsenal aren't. There's a few other quite big clubs. I don't think Juventus were going to be there either. So it's not as big, and there's 32 clubs. This competition has gone from 8 to 32 clubs, which is a huge step up and a significant number of games. At present, I think we're just about to announce the venues, but the kickoff times, they've not been announced, which seems a bit strange. The broadcast rights have not yet been sold, and this is where Infantino has come in and say, why are you not? Why is it not been announced? Because simply nobody's willing to pay the type of fees that he's quoted, in exactly the same way that Electronic Arts weren't willing to pay the amount of money that FIFA wanted for the computer game. And Electronic Arts have just released the 24-25 version of their game, and it's flying off the shelves because, hey, it's got a picture of Erling Haaland on the front of it, and people say, well, actually, we're not particularly bothered whether it's signed off by Gianni Infantino or not. It's the gameplay that we want, and it's the star footballers. So the competition, it does clash with a few other sporting events. Wimbledon quite often clashes with Euros. Don't see that. But we've got the women's Euros next summer, and the Lionesses. I think there'll be a lot of attention on them as opposed to this competition. Inter Miami, Messi's team, they're not in it yet. And Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr, they're not in it yet. So who is going to attract the eyeballs as far as this is concerned? So I think FIFA have got a problem on their hands. And I think it's also interesting that FIFA have announced their big ticket sponsors for the 2026 World Cup, which is taking place in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But they've not announced their big ticket sponsors for the Club World Cup, which is taking place 12 months before that. And that's suggesting that something's not quite right. I think it'll have all of the appeal of the Confederations Cup, which is, can you remember? I don't know who was in the Confederations Cup last time. I certainly don't know who the winners are. And I suspect that this competition is going to be welcomed with a super shrug. The problem that FIFA have is that it's promised big money to the participating clubs. So it's got no TV deal. Is it going to therefore have to self-broadcast it? Is it going to have to use YouTube channels or something like that? And FIFA have got some really good product which does go out on media for countries who you wouldn't necessarily see on a regular basis. But if they're having to go and pay the participating clubs tens of millions of pounds to participate, they could be looking at a very, very hefty bill. And this could be a significantly loss-making competition.
I have no memory of the Confederations Cup at all, but I do remember Man United playing Halifax in the Watley's Cup.
I remember that match as well.
And that was 53 odd years ago. That's worrying, isn't it?
That's because it was on Match of the Day.
Oh, that's well, possibly so. So Infantino's had an emergency meeting with global TV executives last Friday, so clearly they've got cold feet. Oddly enough, this came up in a discussion before the Palace game on Saturday in the Parsons Arms about nobody wanting it. And somebody said, well, somebody must want it. At some stage, somebody must have really wanted it because, as you say, they're naming the 8 venues this weekend. It's going ahead. And it's costing FIFA a fortune. So at some stage, it must have been considered. I suppose you could argue the Super League was considered a good idea at some stage, but he's not backing down, is he? He still seems to think this is a tournament that will happen and will happen every 2 years. Is it going to be? Is it going to be annually?
I think it's going to be every 4 years.
Yeah,
but he also didn't back down when it came to the broadcasting rights for the Women's World Cup.
Yes, okay.
He didn't. He then started complaining at the broadcasters, and the broadcasters saying, are you telling us that you know our business better than we do? Which, knowing Infantino, he probably thinks he does. And then you've got the complications because it was taking place in the Southern Hemisphere, and you've got time differences and so on, which has an impact in terms of eyeballs. And broadcasters, that's what broadcasters are buying. How many eyeballs can you deliver on the back of this product? So I'm not convinced that he's going to find it particularly easy. I think at times there's an element there's an element even of the Wizard of Oz here.
Yeah.
And he is behind the curtain, and he's convinced that this is a good product. There's also no doubt that there's a huge amount of jealousy from FIFA directed towards UEFA, because UEFA has the Euros every 4 years, as we've seen this summer, and it's got the Champions League, which is a huge tournament in terms of broadcasting rights, in terms of commercial rights, and that's every year. And that allows UEFA to distribute money in terms of solidarity payments to many, many clubs throughout European football. Infantino likes the idea of handing out large sums of money, and he can't do that with just one competition every 4 years.
As you know, Kieran, because you were with me for part of it, I visited 13 football clubs in London last week. It was interesting that at all of the clubs that are in the EFL, somebody wanted to have a conversation about the distribution of money from the Premier League to the EFL, and at all the clubs in the Premier League, nobody wanted to have that conversation. How strange! And it's
amazing coincidence.
It's astonishing. Yeah, you're standing around with various people from various clubs, waiting for photographs to be taken, and everyone being very kind. But it came up at every EFL club, and now Gary Neville, who is of course involved in the EFL club, has waded into the talk with some quite harsh words for the Premier League.
Yes. So it is the Labour Party conference taking place this week in Liverpool, a place where I work. I was asked to turn up for something, but I had a diary clash. It's important things are happening. Yeah, we're almost in winter, and it clashed with the chimney sweep, who was due. So I had to turn it down.
And did you have to? You had to be there for the chimney sweep, did you?
You can't let a chimney sweep just wander into your house. You know, it's all Dick Van Dyke, chirpy Cockney. No, there's Finley related issues as well. The last thing I want is Finley zooming around the lounge when Darren the chimney sweeps doing things with his implements. That would cause an incident.
I have to say my experience of chimney sweeps is limited to Dick Van Dyke and Laurel and Hardy.
Right.
Kieran. So probably, given that situation, I'd let Dick Van Dyke wander around my house.
Yeah.
I'd rather go to the Labour Party conference. And, having said that, I'd prefer that Smudge stayed a black and white cat rather than become an all black cat. But where I live, Kieran, not many of us need a chimney sweep, to be perfectly honest. We turn the fire, we take the plug out at night, we put the plug back in the morning, and that's as much maintenance as it takes. Nevertheless, Kieran, this is buttering no parsnips.
This is buttering no parsnips indeed. Yes, Gary Neville has said that the Premier League needs to get its finger out. It needs to acknowledge the contribution which is made by EFL clubs. And if you take a look at that England team, which played in the final of the Euros, practically every single one of those players has experience of being in the EFL. And to be fair to Gary, he's not criticising the Premier League in terms of its level of success. just saying, could be a little kinder. If you're getting so much more money, why can't you give a little bit bigger slice to the clubs in the EFL? The gaps will still exist. They will still be huge gaps, but it would allow further investment. He also said he accepts that might come with strings attached. So if the Premier League is going to give more money, does that have to go into infrastructure, or does a proportion of that have to go into infrastructure? Does a proportion of that have to go into EFL academies? And that would act in the Premier League's best interest, because what does the Premier League come along and do every single season? Oh, you've got some nice academy players. Hello, do you want to go and join my club? Do you want to be in my gang? And so there's an element of self-interest here if the Premier League was to take that approach. I think the frustrating thing, as far as all clubs in the EFL are concerned, is that the legislation has been on the cards. And this is I think Gary Neville has now joined the Labour Party, so that's why he was high profile there. There are also issues to do with Manchester United's potential new stadium, because Andy Burnham was there as well, and he's a former Labour minister, of course. What could be done by the Premier League? Well, they've done nothing. And I think they've scored an own goal, because if they had come up with a reasonable offer to the EFL might have done a U-turn in terms of its enthusiasm for the independent regulator. And then you would be left with a situation where the Premier League is saying, the EFL are our busy mates now. We don't want an independent regulator. The EFL don't want an independent regulator. And the National League doesn't want an independent regulator. And yet you are interfering in the game by having an independent regulator for the Premier League, the EFL, and the National League. But they've not been willing to do that. So I think, sort of from a tactical point of view, the Premier League shot itself in the foot. And when Rick Parry has tried to make progress with Richard Masters, clearly Richard Masters has not had a mandate from the clubs to say, right, we are getting even further success in terms of our international TV deals, and therefore we are willing to give you a bigger slice, because we will still be making far more money.
Interesting, Kieran. A couple of things tangentially off the back of that. First of all, the National League, out of nowhere, have reached out to us and offered to come on and have a chat about various issues that we've raised in the past year or so. I can think of one particular Chesterfield fan who would be delighted to hear that. It will have lots of questions. So that's an interesting one. We're setting that up now. The Daily Mail, who are one of the Premier League's chief supporters in opposing the regulator, having a piece this week saying it's important. Keir Starmer is an Arsenal fan. He's a football fan, so he's simply needs to back out of this situation because he's biased. The Premier League doesn't need a regulator, and the Labour Party cannot have an unbalanced view on this. So, but when it comes to Gary Neville, he's got a lot of credibility with football fans, Gary Neville, especially since the Super League. So it's quite difficult for the Premier League to slap him down in the way that they might do. If other people had said what Gary Neville had said, you'd expect the Mail or the Telegraph or one of their other regular thumpers to have an article next week saying, what does Gary Neville know about football? But I think given his credibility, given his experience, given the fact that he is committed to a League Two club, I think that's going to be harder to do.
That's right. He's run a club in the National League. He's run a club in the EFL. And he's also on the task force in relation to the Manchester United stadium / regeneration issue. So therefore, he's got an element of interest in the Premier League success as well. And he's a Red. Everything you could have wanted. If you're a boyhood Manchester United fan, he achieved on the back of that. So yes, I agree with you. It was a fairly impassioned talk. I felt was reasonable, and unfortunately, we are now in an area of debate and discussion in society where you can't get people around the table and say, right, we both need to make a little bit of concessions. Ultimately, we want to get a deal over the line, because things become so tribalized, and any form of concession is marketed as a weakness. And I think that's a shame. Consensus politics, consensus decision making is a way forwards, but it seems to be in modern society something which is alien.
This is an interesting story from Eastleigh, Kieran, a club that I'm fairly certain we haven't covered before.
Yes, this is in respect to the announcement by the National League of, trumpets start rolling, of the National League Cup.
Oh.
The National League Cup. It's up there with the EFL trophy,
dear.
where there are going to be 16 National League teams, which does not include Eastleigh, it does not include Southend, it does not include Barnet, it does not include Hartlepool, but it's 16 National League teams and 16 PL2 teams, which is effectively the under-21s of Premier League clubs. There might be one or two non-Premier League clubs that are in this PL2 competition. So the EFL Cup is going to involve 32 teams, which are split into 8 groups of 4. There's no Swiss model here. No, that type of foreign nonsense. And there's £1 million worth of prize money that's going to be given. And the prize money is only going to be distributed to those clubs from the National League that make progress. Now, Eastleigh put out a statement to say, we're not entering this competition. And the reason why we're not entering this competition is, first of all, it's taking place between October and April. Well, that's quite important for us. We're already in the FA Cup. We're in the FA Trophy. You're now making us have a third competition, a third cup competition. And by the way, we're in the National League. And do you know what we want to do in the National League? We want to get promoted. So you want to say now that our players will have no midweek slots free. So that puts extra stress on them. You rightly mentioned the issue of Rodri and player strikes. This is adding complications. This is adding fixtures. But as far as I'm aware, no fans have asked for to an existing schedule. They also pointed out that if players are injured playing in the EFL Cup, Eastleigh won't get any compensation from the National League. They won't get any compensation from the Premier League. So this is purely being used as an opportunity for Premier League under-21 teams to get opposition from, for one better phrase, from senior footballers. And that's happened in the EFL Cup as well. They believe that attendances will be very poor. I will be waiting with the first tranche of fixtures. I'll be interested to see, if attendances are actually quoted.
Yeah.
I suspect that won't be the case. And if they are, what they are. Eastleigh also said some of our younger players will be given an opportunity to play in this competition. But if they're any good, you know what the coach of the opposition is going to do? Say, oh, he's tasty. Hello, lad. Fancy coming and joining my club? And by all accounts, there was no consultation by the National League in respect of reaching out to its member clubs and saying, this is what we're thinking of doing. Let's have a vote on it. Let's have a discussion. We are aware of criticism of the National League board when it came to the distribution of monies. And we had a guest who did a report on that during COVID. And there is a lot of unhappiness in respect of the governance of the National League. So fair play to them for reaching out and coming up. I don't know whether that's on the back of some sarcastic tweets from one of us, perhaps, which for reasons I didn't quite anticipate got a huge amount of traction because there does seem to be an awful lot of strong feeling coming from fans of National League clubs who they feel they've been marginalised in this as well.
Much as I admire sarcasm as a form of humour, Kieran, those sarcastic tweets will have come from you, because I tend to specialise in the slightly baffled, love me, please show me affection type tweet. I'm reluctant to get too critical of the National League, Kieran, because bugger me, it's been hard enough to get them on in the first place without alienating them even further. But I am interested to know, as you say, they've chosen 16, so I wonder what the criteria for choosing which teams to take part in this competition. And is there a carrot at the end of this? Is there a final at Premier League ground or a final at Wembley? Or
yeah, I should have checked that. Yes, certainly there are financial incentives if you get out of the knockout phase. But that was another issue raised by Eastleigh. They say by the time we pay the players appearance money, for the group matches, we're losing money because nobody's going to turn up. The chances are that if these matches are taking place during the period of October to April, that will be clashing with European football. So people will be either going to matches or watching it on telly. It will be clashing with the Carabao Cup as well, and so on. So these matches will be taking place in parallel, and there will also be midweek matches taking place in the EFL for Leagues 1 and 2 and the Championship, because it's got to afford. So there's not a huge amount of interest. Look, if you support Eastleigh, if you support Hartlepool or Barnet or Altrincham or Rochdale, whoever it's going to be, you will go and watch your club. But putting out my feelers towards some of the fans of those clubs that I'm aware of, they say, no, we're not going to do that one. We'll sack that one off. It's not because we don't support our club. Effectively, why should we go and watch our first team, or half of our first team and half of our reserves, play against a bunch of under-21s from Bournemouth or Brighton or whoever it's going to be? There's no jeopardy. There's no interest in it.
Kieran, you may have hit on something here with the sarcastic tweet strategy. If you put a few out about FIFA, we might get Infantino on. If you tweet tomorrow, if you go, oh, look at that Gianni Infantino, he's got a good head of hair. he might go, what? How dare? A club we do visit from time to time, Kieran, is Peterborough United, and they seem to be involved in a dispute with Peterborough City.
Yes. So it looks as if the local council think that they are owed money by Peterborough United Football Club. Now, Dara McAntony is a feisty owner, I think it's fair to say.
Oh, yes.
I've been on TalkSport with Dara, and get on fine. And he talks a lot of sense. He talks some things that you agree with and some things you don't. And of course, he will say exactly the same about me or anybody else, which he is right and proper to do. So there is some form of financial dispute between Peterborough United and the council. I think we are talking hundreds of thousands of pounds. Peterborough don't seem to be willing to back down. They can afford to back down in the sense that they will have just picked up a huge wad of money for Tony going to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
But it could be on a but I'd always say just because you've got a windfall money coming doesn't mean you have to give it to somebody else or proportion it to somebody else. So that is, again, people being unwilling or unable to come to a compromise position. And this does appear to be something which is becoming a theme on the show.
I didn't know whether it was sweet or sad that Ivan Toney has offered to fly all his mates out every weekend already to his new country. A club we've definitely never visited before, Kieran, is Solihull Moors Women. And this is a story. Oddly enough, I keep an eye on the football news, but I try not to get too involved in the stories because I want to learn about them from you. But this one I read and followed, and again, women's football, Kieran, for all of its success at certain levels, it's still not being taken properly seriously at some levels. And I was quite disappointed with this story, I have to say.
Yes, and we should be celebrating women's football today because they've just announced a new sponsorship arrangement between, I think it's Barclays and the WSL. It's a 3-year deal. I think we're talking tens of millions of pounds. So it's a big increase. And you've got to give credit to the new team involved in the professional end of women's football, the WSL and the Championship. And I quite like the fact that it looks like the money's going to be split 75-25 as well, which is great.
Yeah.
And if that was the case between the Premier League and the EFL, a lot of the issues in football wouldn't exist. So Solihull Moors women's team put out a message on social media, and effectively on the lines of, we're fed up of being treated as an afterthought. We're fed up being treated in a patronising manner. Yes, the club is at a tier in football where it's not generating a lot of money, but it's connected to a club in the National League. For away travel, well, there isn't any for matches. In terms of pitches, for midweek matches, they've had to cancel some matches because nobody at Solihull Moors has actually arranged for pitches. Yeah, and that's just shabby. The kit is not fit for purpose. And we're in 2024. Emily Pankhurst didn't exist for this to be sort of a somewhat paternalistic. We know that the men's teams generate more money than women's teams. But if you want to grow as a club at any level, if you are going to have a women's team, then treat it with respect. And this has failed to be the case. Solihull Moors has come back with sort of harumphing and grumbling, sort of saying, well, we were trying to sort this, but they've gone and put out this announcement. But I suspect there's been unanswered emails and meetings have been cancelled, and therefore the women's team have just said, you know what, we just want to go and play football. We're not here to make money, because at that level of football, you're not making any money. We want to do it for the sheer joy. And if you take a look at the growth of women's football, I've got 2 granddaughters. They both got football kits. You go back a generation, Kevin. How many girls, when you were taking your lad to school, how many girls were wearing football kits? And you'll go to Palace and I'll go to Brighton, and you see it every week now. And that is such a positive. There is a new talent coming through, and that talent's going to increase. Well, let's create the facilities. And there are so many barriers to that it is disappointing.
Is it Brighton kits your granddaughters are wearing?
They are, yes.
Oh, well, Christmas is coming up. Uncle Kevin might send something down in the. Solihull Moors, Kieran, are a grown-up team. They're not. They're not a Sunday team. They generate a certain amount of income, certainly enough to pay for pitches for the women, to pay for training facilities for the women, to pay for shirts for the women. So that there's no excuse financially. So it can only be that there is still, and I'm not suggesting that this is the case in Solihull Moors, but we know, Kieran, from talking to people, that there is still a certain 1970s attitude to women's football that people are clever enough not to articulate in public. But it's still there. We've got 2 more stories. It's been such a busy show, Kieran. We've got 2 more stories, both of which are interesting. And if we've had good news for Everton and terrible news for Reading, this seems like very good news for Dundalk, a team we'd never mentioned, but until recently we had big concerns about.
That's right. I was on RTE radio last week at 10 to 5. And there was a 5 p.m. deadline.
Oh, wow.
As to whether, so it's one of these very exciting things. I half expected Anna Rice to put in an appearance to see whether or not we could get the deal done in time. That's a blast from the past. Yeah. But there is good news in respect of Dundalk FC, who I think if you take a look at the Irish League, have been the most successful club in the last decade or something. They were the champions as recently as 2019. A consortium has been formed by a local lawyer, and it was great to read the Irish press, because not only is he a local lawyer, they decided to go and put his address. That is just so Irish. So John Temple from such and such road. That's John Temple. And I'm absolutely delighted that there is somebody called Donald who is involved in the consortium, because that means it's proper Irish consortium. That's the positive. Now, having read the announcement, it looks like the consortium are willing to pay the wages to the end of the season. Now, Dundalk are presently in a relegation spot. They're currently bottom of the Irish League. And if they are relegated, there's no commitment in respect of next season at this stage. It could be that they're just trying to buy time. It could be that there'll be many players out of contract and they can have a complete reset in terms of the cost base of the club. But a club like, it's a modest ground by Premier League standards, but there's still plenty of overheads to be dealt with. So yes, it's good that we've still got a Dundalk FC, because every fan matters equally as every other fan has always been our motto from day one. And that's something to be happy about. But I'm not reading from the announcement that this is a necessarily long-term solution. I hope it is. That John Temple will in his consortium say, well, actually, we've had great fun and we've really got the bug now, and we're going to set a budget going forwards. But Dundalk lost quite a bit of money in 2023. I've had a look at their accounts, and they lost well over €1 million. That's a fair amount of money to find for a product which doesn't get a lot of attention in terms of TV broadcasting and commercial rights and so on.
Yeah, if any people are listening to us for the first time here and thinking to themselves, it'd been a bit Father Ted talking about the Irish like that. We're both half Irish, so we both feel that we are able to celebrate some of the quirks. I just love the fact that if you're an RTE and there's a 5 o'clock deadline, come 10 past 5, they'll be going, 5:30 will be fine. 6 o'clock will be grand. John won't be home yet. He won't be home. It's the traffic's bad on the way to Rossmore Avenue where John lives. Our last story, Kieran, whether you're a Shrewsbury Town fan or a Shrewsbury Town fan, you've got something to look forward to this season, but not necessarily with your club.
That's right. I've not been to the new ground, but I used to love going
wasn't it
to
great?
the old Gay Meadow.
Oh, Gay Meadow was
fan.
fantastic.
It was absolutely brilliant. And, the cheers when somebody booted the ball over the stand and you knew, he's got to go get the boat out. And as a football, as away fan, you just thought this was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
No matter how many times it happened.
I think we should explain, those new listeners that have just listened to us for the first time today.
Yes.
Brian Moore, who was the London local football presenter, used to lose his shit every time this happened because the ground was on the banks of the River Severn. And is it the River Severn? No, you know my geography.
I'm not sure.
Let's change that to a river.
A river, yes.
A river.
Yeah, I like that.
And if the ball went out of the ground and into the river, a little chap in a coracle, which is a tiny little one-person boat, had to row out to get it. And at least once a year, because we were in Division 3 for a couple of seasons, Brian, if we played Shrewsbury away, you knew we'd be on just because the ball got boot. They were kind of gentle at times, Kieran, weren't they?
Yes, yes.
And in a way, more shit.
Yeah, they were quite. Yes, because you're playing on rolled mud as opposed to grass for a start. I never thought that European football. This doesn't mean that I wouldn't say that I was hopeful that Shrewsbury Town would make progress. I never thought that European football would be taking place at Shrewsbury, but TNS, Total Network Solutions, congratulations to them. They are in the group stages of the Europa Conference League, and they will be playing their matches at the new Meadow. So the cameras will be there, and I think Shrewsbury fans might want to pop along out of curiosity. I certainly would. And I think it's great for both parties. TNS get a bigger ground. They get somewhere which is more suited to the demands of UEFA in terms of cameras and so on. There's better facilities because the new Meadow is a new stadium. It's one which I need to tick off my list. I'm starting to get twitchy, but Baroness doesn't quite have my ground spotters enthusiasm. Have you ever been to Shrewsbury, Baroness? No. Why would I want to go?
It's
beautiful.
It's a beautiful place. Plus, you've got Ludlow down the road, big foodie scene. You and I should go to Shrewsbury, Kieran.
Yes.
And on the way, we'll go to Wollaston, which is in Northampton. The team, the team that provides the football. So, remind me, Kieran, which league TNS play in?
It's the Welsh League. They are the Welsh champions, Cymru League.
Yeah. So there's no issue with UEFA with them playing in the jurisdiction of another country, then.
No, not a problem at all.
Great. Okay,
that's okay.
That's good. Well, let's go. How can we not go to a European game at Shrewsbury?
Yeah, we perhaps we need to arrange a gig.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, get the princess involved. The
reason I say Shrewsbury is we've learned over the 5 years that nothing gets people more angry. People of Shropshire are lovely, in my experience, until you cross them by saying Shrewsbury when they say it's Shrewsbury. So you go for, but I will still get angry tweets saying, "Why are you calling it Shrewsbury? It's Shrewsbury." And you go, look, it's not Londonderry, is it? It's not that important. Let's be honest. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be really kind of you. It'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. Our legendary Christmas quiz is coming up, always one of my favourite nights of the year. You can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. We have a live show coming up very soon at the Banana Cabaret in Balham, the Bedford pub, at the Cheerful Ilful pod. And we've got a live show down in Sussex for the Samaritans. You can get details of those on our pod as well. And we give it on our email website. Come on, Grandad, choose one. choose one. We've got a tapestry. You can log on to our tapestry as well. So you'll be details of that, and we'll give you more details on the pod as well. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. You can follow us on Twitter, X. You can find us on our YouTube channel, and if you'd like to buy our book, which is now out on paperback, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We have an interview for you coming up tomorrow. We'll be back on Tuesday with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you. As always, you're so kind in terms of your interactions and your responses. I'd just like to say a special mention to, I always say, give us a review. It does help us in terms of the ratings and so on. And it's always pleasant to hear those. There's one person who gave us a review and I was almost moved to tears by it. And whoever you are, and I'll read it. I won't name the person, but we don't know the name. And the review was, if you ask me about the Price of Football podcast, I'd say, yeah, it's good. That's very kind. Yeah, I'm well made up for that. And then it goes on to say, but if you ask me on a deeper level, I'd say it's strange, but this podcast has helped me through some dark times and some dark evenings. And now I'm sat here listening whilst rocking my 3-week-old daughter to sleep. And I'm so thankful for Kieran and Kevin for being there and helping me through those times. And that's, we don't know what we've done. We're just a couple of old blokes who are very fond of each other. And I think we try to show a bit of warmth and decency towards everybody. But to say that's probably one of the nicest things that somebody's ever said about me. So whoever you are, drop me a message.
Yeah,
on Twitter, or drop me a line on Kieran at priceoffootball.com, and I'll send you a copy of the signed book for you and your daughter. And all I can say is, I'm glad you're in a better place. I'm so delighted that you've got a daughter to cuddle, and all the best for the future.
It did make me well up, and we're both South London men of a certain age and very sentimental, Kieran,
Yes,
which drives our partners up the wall completely. But that did make me well up. But also there was a sense. The comedian in me went, the first bit, it's quite good. What do you mean it's quite good? And then after welling up and getting sentimental, the bloke in me went, well, it's a good job we had a daughter, Kieran, because I would have really got the hump if he'd named his son Kieran and not Kevin. I'd have been furious. But no, it was lovely. And we know anecdotally, Kieran, a lot of people listen to us for a lot of reasons. And we always love hearing from people who have been with us from the start. So thank you for that. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.